places, but in general, the fact that there are so many unemployed people and there's so much precarity in this country, and there's precious little interest in the house of government in making people's lives less precarious, that makes it much harder for people to take the risks of organizing in any way. And so I don't know. It's going to be a confluence of deteriorating conditions, meeting people's willingness to and understanding of ways to change them, and how those things develop in the next couple of years is going to depend on, like I said, things that I can't predict. And anyway, people can pretend that they know, but I don't think they can say with any real certainty.
In terms of like realistic priorities, in terms of like what is the next step to get done, in terms of what should be the number one goal that the left is trying to pursue at this moment?
I mean, what's the left though? I mean, there really isn't a left in this country. It's a subculture. It's an affect, but it's not a movement. It doesn't have organizational capacity.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, who would be, when you say the left making, like, who are the left? Who would even be making these agenda items, and how would you have any ability to get people on board with them?
Yeah, I guess I don't. The no answer really kind of comes to the top of mind from that, but I don't really. I'm trying to just like get a sense of just like the best like practical kind of steps for it. I guess. I mean, the only really kind of figurehead I can think of is just like someone like, I don't know, like just the people that we have already elected in Congress already. But I don't think there's, as you say, I don't think there's really too much that they can do since they're, again, so small in number.
Beyond that, the challenge, the thing is people think, well, people will always say, well, we'll get in there, we'll get rid of Trump, and then we're going to hold Biden accountable. But that forgets that the Republicans still exist. The Republican Party is still there. There will be posing an absolute existential challenge to any Biden policy. And so the pressure to support Biden in the face of the worst Republicans that is supposed to be, the reason that you can't ask him to do anything on the campaign trail, you can't make demands of the campaign for promises for the term, that's still going to be there. That dynamic doesn't go away after the election. And so I don't see how anyone in government is going to be able to get away from that trap of being forced into discipline by the very existence of the ravening Republican mob waiting to disassemble everything.
Yeah, it really is very kind of easy to imagine somebody like any of the kind of like representatives or left-wing figures in Congress being very easily kind of pushed back into line on any of this. Do you kind of worry about kind of left-wing ideas in terms of like the principles of like like the theory aspect of it? Do you worry about that kind of being like too inaccessible for people?
I'm sorry, you cut out a little bit.
In terms of, it's just like, it's with a lot of times people are like, oh, I really love the left-wing ideas. Like, I really love, like, Medicare for all. I love $15 minimum wage, like, unionization, whatever. Do you worry about, like, and people get into that, do you think that the left could be kind of more, like, the barrier, do you worry about, like, the barrier to entry for people getting into like left-wing politics being a little too high in terms of people like feeling pressure, like read the theory and all that stuff like that?
That's the issue, but I think the overarching one is people don't know how to do politics. People don't know how politics affects them. They can't conceive of politics. They live in a hyper-normalized, the capital realist world where the horrors of their life are just naturally occurring, or are, even if they recognize them as political, do not recognize politics as a shiftable, changeable, or challengeable structure. I think that's the deeper problem than anything related to like the left as it currently exists, although there's plenty of problems there.
Yeah.
Like there's just not a transmission belt from regular people who are suffering to a political project.
And how can we? Do you think there's like? Do you think the political project is there and the people are there, but the transmission valve isn't, or do we have to like work on the political project before we build that transmission valve?
I'd say that they have to be done in turn. I mean, you have to build political structures that can reach out to people, but then those have to be fired with a actual agenda and with a message and with a platform of issues to engage people with.
Oh, okay. And in terms for, I think you may have cut out there a little bit. I'm not sure, but in terms of a like transmission valve, like what is that? Like in terms of political project, like can you be a little bit more kind of specific about those things? Like what do they look like in practice, or are we close? Are we too far away from those to even kind of really get a clear picture of what those would look like?
What does what look like?
Like the political project, like the transmission, like how do we get that message out to more people? How do we kind of like break through the drag of people's everyday lives, would you say?
I have no idea. I really don't. This has been the thing that since Bernie's campaign ended that has stuck in my head the most is that people just were not paying attention. The people who needed to pay attention were not engaged with it at all. It did not penetrate in any way. How you change that? Bernie was doing what everybody, including myself, thought should be done. Talk about people's real lives. Talked about things like healthcare and dwindling, and the inability for people to live on the income they were making from their jobs, and the dwindling power of workers to control the conditions of their labor. And people weren't paying attention. What other than that would work with a higher amount of profile than a presidential candidacy? I don't know.
Yeah, I feel like, if Bernie, like that just to me seems to be the best way, I guess, to do it. Really the only way that, as you said, that can be thought of to do it in terms of profile and getting people out there. Do you think people weren't paying attention because Bernie and the campaign weren't reaching them effectively enough, or did you see that as kind of more of a just the walls are too thick to break through?
I would say that the political terrain, the politics as experience in this country is experienced as a media phenomenon, as a show, and half this country has stopped watching the program, and that means that anything that is done there, anything that is carried out there, is just not going to reach them by definition, or it's going to reach them in a baffled and muted and mutated version that is less likely to actually engage. So that's why I was saying anything that's going to come out of the current and continuing crisis is going to have to have some sort of spontaneity to it, simply because there's nothing that can be injected into the political arena that's going to reach people who have decided beforehand, or not even decided, just had it happen as a condition of life, that it's not anything worth paying attention to.
Yeah, it really, in terms of, if you look at what's been going on for however many years, like it's hard to really blame people for tuning out and getting disconnected from what is going on. That is for sure. Just before I let you go here, I'm really wondering, in terms of course, we've talked about a lot of the kind of dark and tough questions here on the show today. In your mind, politically, what are you most looking forward to? What are you most hopeful for in the future?
What am I looking forward to?
Yeah, like what are you hopeful for politically in the future?
Hopeful for? Not really any. I mean, I don't think there's. I'm not. I am trying to suspend any sense of anticipation, either positive or negative. I don't want to become just a nihilistic doomer, but I don't want to bash my head against some sort of Pollyanna fantasy. So I am reminding myself that no matter what you think you can discern from broader sweeping phenomenon and trends that you can identify in the political and economic and cultural firmament, what's going to end up determining outcomes is going to be contingent on the way that the specific events break down, and I don't know what those are, and I remind myself of that just to prevent myself from becoming wrapped up in too much of a fatalistic outlook one way or the other.
Yeah, I definitely think that makes sense. It's like it's very easy to get ahead of yourself, but it really is probably more effective, I guess, to take things day by day and look at each event, I would say, like as it plays out.
Yeah, exactly.
All right. Matt Christman, thank you so much for joining us today. Really, really do appreciate it. Hope we didn't go in too many circles there, but again, really, really appreciate you joining us. Big fan of your show, and of course, that is Chapo Trap House and Duvall Matt on Twitter @Christman. That's been Newsflash for today.